Welcome to another episode of the Meeting Space podcast. I'm sitting here with Miguel Neves, and he is joining us all the way across the big pond from Europe. Hello, Miguel.
Hello, Magdalena. Nice to be here with you. Yep, I'm joining you from a pretty sunny today, Denmark, over the pond.
That's awesome. I am originally from Poland, so you're in my neck of the woods.
Yes, not too far.
Not too far. Miguel graciously agreed to be a guest on the podcast today to chat a little bit about some interesting topics, I think very relevant and very current in today's climate. Of course, virtual events, but we will be chatting a little bit about how you can, as a meeting and event planner, select the right tools for your virtual event. I would love to get in to creating new concepts and delivering engaging sessions, although we might be cutting this conversation into 2 episodes. So we will see how much we can cover today, because those are quite extensive. And a little bit background on Miguel. As I read through your bio, Miguel, you are just, your credentials are very impressive. MPI, UK and Ireland, IMEX Group, you have a master's degree from Conference and Events Management from the University of Westminster, CMP, DES, all the good stuff. So tell us in your words a little bit about yourself and how did you end up where you ended up?
Sure. So I started in the music industry in Portugal, which is a very tiny little industry. And I didn't know there was an events industry at all. I just thought I was going to be in the music industry all my life. Stumbled upon the events industry, like I think many people do, from doing concerts and kind of being backstage with bands. And ended up really enjoying it and kind of saw the events industry as something that I could do that wasn't music. You know, you get a similar level of excitement when you're on stage or when you're preparing a concert. When you do an event, it's very similar in that sense. So I kind of tried to do it, failed really badly in the first few years because I thought that it was easy business, easy money. So I kind of went, okay, no, I need to figure out how to do this properly. So I ended up in the UK doing the master's degree at the University of Westminster, decided to really, get the academic qualification, decided to build my network from scratch, start to figure out what is this events industry, how does it work? And then it just evolved from there. I got really involved with MPI. That really helped to build my network. It's still a huge part of my network today. I was president of the UK and Ireland chapter. Now I'm actually on the international board. And through that, I was a planner for a few years at the start of my career. Then I joined IMEX, so running the IMEX America and IMEX in Frankfurt trade shows. I did mainly the community management and content side of things. So I was there for 6 years. And for the last 3 years, I've had my own business doing pretty much the same thing, content, community management, social media, and now virtual events for the events industry.
Very awesome. I can just say one thing. Wow. That sounds like a lot of great experience that you have gained throughout the years. I visited your website and somehow along the way, I can see some cooking. Is that a passion? Is that something that it's a hobby? How do you mix in cooking into all of this?
Absolutely. So I love food. I wouldn't say I'm the best chef or anything like that, but I am very interested in food. And I think we can touch everybody with food, right? I think almost everybody really loves some kind of food. So when I started my own company, I actually originally named it Social Media Chefs because I like the idea of using recipes. And for me, recipes are just like scientific experiments almost. They're kind of methods that you use to do something. And I apply the same kind of theory to content. So when I work with clients building content, I kind of build recipes for them. I'm saying, hey, you want to be on Instagram? Okay, this is what we're going to do with your content, with the events that you do. This is how we're going to get those pictures. This is how we're going to talk about it. And so I build up a recipe book or a cookbook, which is just a fun way of, rather than calling it, like a business manual or a content manual, let's call it a cookbook. Let's do it as a recipe. And I think people have they can relate to that. So it's my approach to that. I've since renamed the company, but the concept of cooking, and now also I have my live stream that I do called Cooking Up Virtual Events. I think it's a nice thing to have a little bit of fun with, but there's a sort of serious methodology behind that as well.
That is amazing. Very creative.
Thank you.
Okay, let's jump into the topics.
Okay.
Let's start with selecting the right tools for your virtual events. I think that's where you would start when cooking up something, right? You would need to make sure that you have all the tools in your toolbox to create this absolutely amazing dish. So let's start there. Let's start with selecting the right tools for virtual events. How would you go about it?
So it's actually kind of a little bit misleading, because my advice when it comes to selecting the right tools is not to start there.
Okay.
It's actually really to start with the event objectives and the concept of the event, right? And then working out the people that you're going to need to work with, the processes that you're going to need, and then working out the tools.
Gotcha.
So I have this kind of format, which is always concept first, process second, and third, tools.
Great.
Right? That's my simple workout. Now, what I realized is that if people are not familiar with the tools, with what's available, what options they have, what features each tool has, it's very hard to redefine concepts or to kind of figure stuff out. So what I now say is, I'm not very strict with this. What I say is, go and explore the tools. Go and figure out what's out there, what's possible. I think a lot of tools promise a lot of things, like, a 3D AI enhanced, machine learning algorithm that does all these things. And then you try it and it's like, well, in theory, that's all possible. But, people have to be almost robots entering huge amounts of data, or, allowing connections with their social media and having really fast computers, so there's lots of sort of tools that can do amazing things. But it doesn't mean that they're the right tool all the time, right? And if the user journey, if logging in takes a long time, if it's not available on all devices, there's lots of issues that would maybe cause you to say, hey, this is a great theory, but it's not really right for my group or my event. So I would encourage everybody to go out, explore tools, try some demos, see some videos on YouTube, just, get to know the tools that they think might work for their event. But then don't kind of like select the tool before you've decided the concept of your event. Because if you do it that way, you're always going to be stuck with the limitations of the tool, right? You're going to kind of build your event around what the tool offers. Well, I think it's much better to understand a few different tools and then go back to the drawing board and figure out the concept. Is this an event that's all about networking and connecting and finding business deals between people? If that's the idea, then okay, let's make sure we understand that that's the priority. Figure out how we're going to find these people. How do we attract them? How do we invite them? How do we connect them? And then figure out the tool that's going to allow for that event to really be successful. But you know what I mean? Like if you start with a tool, then it's like, oh, this tool only allows for 3 descriptions in the bio. So that's what I'm going to go and do. And actually, there might be other tools that allow for much more. So, that's a silly example, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yes, definitely. I do. I get some questions very often on LinkedIn asking, since I have some experience with few tools in the digital space, I get asked, what would you recommend if this is my objective, where I want to engage audience to come up on stage, for example? How would I do that in the digital space? Which tools are there to accomplish that, either at keynote sessions or in breakouts? So I definitely hear what you are trying to convey to the listeners. With the plethora of virtual platforms out there today, there is just so many. It seems like every day, every hour, a new platform emerges, and then you have the ones that are leading the pack. We are on one of them, Zoom, right? And you have others. How would you go about, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, objective, concept, and then the tools. But let's say, you do have your objective set. How then would you go to find the tools? Is there a one place where you can go and browse all the platforms? What's out there that makes it easier for event and meeting planner to see a synopsis of all those tools and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to choose? Like, for example, for hotel sourcing, you have Cvent. That's kind of my go-to. How about virtual platforms?
It's interesting. I've actually built one, which is, I haven't really built it as a commercial product. I've built it as this is my list, and I like to share it publicly. So it's actually at virtualevents.wiki. That's the URL. Everybody's welcome to use it. I have to admit, it's not complete. As you say, there's new things showing up every day. So what I do is I now kind of, every time I update it, I will share it on social media, usually to Twitter, like, oh, here's the latest one that I've added to the list, for example. But we're actually at a really interesting point, and I don't want to make this about self-promotion, but there's tens or almost hundreds of people out there trying to do this right now. So there's lots of online directories that traditionally work with venues and hotels and are now transforming and having also a part of it for online tools. And Event MB, the Event Manager blog, also do a pretty extensive list, and they actually go into quite a lot of detail. I know micebook.com have one as well. The Virtual Events Institute have one. And I think they're all valid. I would always try to understand the business model around it. And that's why I'm trying to keep my list very much. I know it's not the best list. I know it's not, it doesn't have all the information, but it's a very honest list. It's a list with what the platforms that I know and my kind of way of seeing those platforms. Because I think most of the lists that you'll find, just like Cvent, there's a commercial model behind it, right? So you have to kind of understand, am I being shown this platform over another one because they're sponsoring or because they're actually more appropriate for my event? Yeah. And because when it comes to virtual events, it's quite complex, like the details about what's different between each platform are quite complex. And what I find is a lot of platforms will make big statements on their website. They'll try to market themselves as doing everything. And it's only really when you get a demo or you actually try it that you understand some limitations. And some of the areas to look out for are, for example, the registration process. Some have, their own registration module or part of it. Some don't. Some you have to use something external. But the ones that do, sometimes it's not very good, right? It's quite basic. And then you're kind of stuck between, do I do the registration somewhere else and then send people and then I have to connect the data? So that can be, right away a big thing. And the other area one of the areas that I think is worth really checking is the video streaming part. That's a big, important part of it, virtual events. And some platforms basically just let you embed like a feed from YouTube or Vimeo. So you kind of do the production outside the platform, stream it to something like YouTube or Vimeo, and then you bring it into the platform, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It can be a really good way to produce the stream, but not many platforms are kind of upfront about that. A lot of them will say, oh, we have our own, proprietary system, or we can stream video and we can do all sorts of things. And it's like, okay, well, tell me how that works. And it's only once you actually get, somebody on a call that they can actually explain that to you. The same thing applies to one-on-one meetings. If you want to have people have sort of sales calls or one-on-one video chats within the platform, many have that functionality and it works, but some don't, right? Like it's maybe you put a Zoom link and then you open up a Zoom meeting, or a lot of platforms use a company called Whereby that does sort of browser-based one-on-one chats. So these are the kind of details that I think are important to understand once you actually get a demo and once you kind of get into the platforms, in more detail.
I have so many, excuse me, I have so many questions for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This opens a big can of worms. And that's why I'm always like, okay, great. Let's go and experiment, but go back to your objectives, your concepts, and really kind of get those right before you start excluding or including platforms, because you can go in so many different directions.
Yeah. What I'm hearing currently, at least here in the States, and it's been said on few platforms like EventMB, and then I'm logging into LinkedIn and there is a live stream of some event planner interviewing someone, and I'm hearing the message of don't try to move the in-person part into digital and expect the digital to have the same kind of impact, especially when it comes to trade shows. So don't expect the trade show from your in-person event to have exactly the same impact as you do in virtual. I hear that also about other parts of the virtual events. How would you go about, would you, I guess my question is, connect the in-person and the virtual and try to, marry those in together, not necessarily a hybrid, but as far as the impact that it has on attendees? Or would you basically go and try to find a completely something out of the box that might be a little bit more risk-taking, but can produce somewhat interesting audience engagement? Those are topics that everybody is struggling right now, and I'm really curious to hear what experts in the industry like you have to say about that.
It's a big question, and you can go a number of different ways. I think the objectives are very important, but let's assume that an objective is a trade show or some kind of event where business takes place. I think that the trade show element, the business part, is one that's quite hard to do online well. And I think that's a lot of people are struggling with this. The sponsorship dollars, getting that kind of revenue and translating that to a virtual event, it's not easy. And I don't think the solution is to make something that looks like a trade show. I think that's a mistake. I know some platforms, try to go for the 3D model, or you have a virtual stand, or you do this. And for me, it just doesn't make sense, because when you're at your computer, you want to find the products that you think might match your needs, and you want to do that in the most efficient way possible. And that's probably not going through an interface that looks like a trade show, right? So I think that kind of system, I'm not a fan of. Having said that, when you're at your computer, you can just Google anything, right? So if you're presenting an event that just displays kind of an intro video to each, company and has a link to their website, that offers very little value, right? So I like to focus more on new concepts, in the sense of, when you're doing a live event, you have hundreds, maybe thousands of people's energy and attention focused on one platform, on one place. So you want to make use of that. You want to use that, and preferably you want to have conversations, you want to have discussions, you want to bring that kind of human element to it. To have lots of kind of salespeople waiting to have a sales call, kind of in a Zoom room somewhere or something like that, that to me doesn't feel great. Like, that's just, and then how do you increase that capacity depending on how many people end up on that booth or whatever? So there's a lot of kind of theories and concepts that aren't quite right for virtual events, in my opinion. So I prefer to kind of flatten the lines, kind of create a level playing field, and invite, buyers and suppliers, however it works out, to come together and discuss topics of interest. So focus on the content, make it more about the discussion, And when you're working with exhibitors and sponsors, I would do my best to try and integrate them into the content, integrate them into the discussion. So just a quick example, I'm running an event tomorrow that has 4 sponsors that are destinations mainly. And what we're doing is there's 2 speakers during the day. We have kind of a keynote section of only 20 minutes, and then we have 20 or 30 minutes of breakouts. And so the partners who are really the sponsors, they're the spokespeople for the breakouts. They're kind of leading the conversation in the breakouts. So people are going to break out into rooms. They're going to be split up amongst these different breakouts, and they're just going to be the facilitators, of those breakout rooms. And we're not kind of going to be sitting there and, showing them videos of the destinations and kind of doing all the promotion stuff. We're just making sure that they're part of the conversation. And it's not easy, and especially when suppliers or exhibitors are more used to kind of, being at their booth and doing their thing. There's a real kind of shift in thinking of like, okay, I can't just do my sales pitch. I have to kind of get involved and get involved with the content. But I think that has some really positive flip side, because I find that the best networking that I do is when there's a topic that I can talk about. Like when I go to a lot of MPI events, when I go to MPIWC or something like that, I go to, breakout sessions. And it's really in the conversations with other people in those breakout sessions, that's the best networking that I do. I end up really getting to know people, understanding their issues, understanding what concerns they have. When I go to the big networking sessions, at night, I end up with the people I already know, because I end up kind of catching up and stuff, right? So having that kind of content as the context, I think is really important. And I think as we develop our virtual event concepts, we're going to develop different ways of including that content and using that as the central piece. Because ultimately, I think the magic about in-person events is that we make attendees feel special. When somebody goes to a nice hotel or a nice convention center and has a nice meal and has a pleasant experience, they feel special. They feel kind of wanted, right? They're a unique opportunity to travel and to do these things. We can't really do that online. It's just another online meeting. It just happens to be called an event, right? So that idea of making people feel special, we have to work in other ways to make people feel special. And for me, it's all about the conversation and the content. If we can do that in a kind of constructive way, then, they may not feel pampered in the same way, but we can make them feel special as we're listening, we're understanding their concerns. There's a lot of people contributing and hoping to help. And I think that can go a long way. So I'm kind of trying to push all my clients and everybody that I'm working with more in that direction, rather than trying to replicate any sort of sales arena of some sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have also a lot of questions about that, but that's
yeah. I mean, this could be like 5 hours, right?
Yes, exactly. So no, thank you for that input. There's some great tidbits there that you were willing to share, Miguel. Now, as far as the networking, I at the beginning of the virtual platform boom, the 2 main things was networking and audience engagement. Those were the kind of the leading topics in the industry. And they still are, but there is a lot of material out there that it's just simply being repeated from what has happened a few months ago. What are the new ways to, that you would recommend to engage audience and network in the virtual world?
So I think this really ties in a little bit with the conversation about the tools. I don't think this is a tool question. I think there are some platforms out there. Like I'm a big fan of this tool called wander.me, which if you haven't checked it out, it's a sort of 2-dimensional view from the top networking space where everybody is just a little dot on a screen and you can see their names. And then if your dot gets close to another dot, you start a video conversation automatically. So it's not for every type of event, but it's a really nice tool to kind of emulate what happens in a physical event, right? So it's that kind of thing. But I think on the question of engagement, for me, that is about setting expectations. I think, we have Zoom fatigue where we're tired of webinars. I get the feeling that every time I say the word webinar, people kind of hear in their heads, okay, it's like a 1 hour session. Some speaker is going to take about 5 minutes to figure out how to load up their slides. Then they talk and there's lots of small bullet points on the screen. And then I can just do my emails while somebody's talking. And then at the end, there's like 5 minutes of Q&A and I can go back to work, right? That's kind of like the expectation. So when you say, hey, we want engagement. Okay, well, I think, first of all, it starts with preparing the participants. If you want them to be on camera, if you want them to be live, you have to make it very clear to them that this is an event where we expect you to be live. We expect you to participate. And not everybody wants to do that. Some people just want to kind of consume content in the background. And that's okay, right? And podcasts, for example, are great for that because you can just, consume at your leisure and do whatever you want. But if you want that engagement, you have to make it clear to everybody that that's what you're expecting. And then you have to kind of set it up from the start, because you could also kind of make it clear that that's what you're expecting. And then you hit them with 30 minutes of relatively boring sponsorship message at the beginning. You've lost them again, right? And when it comes to virtual events, you're only ever one click away from something else. Right? Your emails, whatever it is that you rather be doing, that's it. So the level of commitment is really low. And I like to say that when you're doing virtual events, everybody's got a front row seat. So everybody can see all the content, everybody can hear everything clearly, much better than they could in in-person events. But that front row seat is also incredibly intimidating. Nobody really likes to sit at the front row normally in events, and there's a reason for that. So if you're wanting everybody to be on camera and everybody to participate, you have to, from the start of the session, welcome people, make them feel special as much as you can on a virtual event, and get their contributions. So if you're really serious about engagement, I think you have to get audience response, audience feedback right from the start. I did an event yesterday where right at the beginning, we introduced the team. It was a kind of an award ceremony for an online game that I played. We introduced the team. So we introduced the organizing team, and then we asked everybody to introduce their own teams. And that took half an hour. It was only an hour event, but half an hour into it, we knew everybody. Everybody was waving to each other. Everybody was connecting. And, it wasn't the perfect event, but I made sure, I kind of insisted that we did that right at the beginning so that everybody would turn on their camera, would wave, would say, hey, this is me, this is our team, this is what we did. And it just, everybody at that meeting had a really kind of warm, fuzzy feeling because it was like, oh, it's cool. I know now the name of this person, etc. So yeah, I get a lot of these questions about engagement, and I tend to kind of push back a little bit, like saying, it's not just about finding this tool that has a nice chat function. That's not right. Engagement. Engagement is preparing people and then from the start engaging, from the start kind of making sure that it's engaging all the way through. And, I have no issue with content. Content is good. Good content is good. But, don't have someone speak for an hour unless they're, Oprah, Barack Obama, or Deepak Chopra or something. If they're a really good speaker, then let them go. Let them fly. Right. But most people are not that level of speaker. Most people are good content experts. They know their field. But, after 10, 20 minutes, you're kind of like, okay, give me a break. Play a video. Do something to get me kind of, get me in a different mode. And I think that's important. So engagement is a tricky topic. And I think a lot of people are a little confused on how to get it started.
Yeah, definitely. I actually I was a virtual room host and facilitator on a conference here in the United States. And one of the keynotes was so engaging that I was just like, this is great. The guy allowed us to, it was engaging. I don't have my phone with me, but you could use your phone and send pictures and drawings. There was a special pad on the website that he, linked to his phone, where he would receive the drawings of people we just drew with our finger. Everybody was raving. It was simple. but just the way.
Is it called Pickles?
No, it was, oh my gosh, it's a name of a gentleman. I will send you the link, and I will
Cool.
also put the link of what he does in the chat, in the notes of the show, because it literally blew my mind. He utilized something that he knew people will be distracted by, their phone, right?
Yeah.
And then, because it was kind of like a contest, or you didn't know if your thing will be featured at the end of the meeting, and there was a sequence to each picture was about something, and then it all came together at the end. Things like that. I was looking at it from a perspective of an event and meeting planner, and I was thinking, what a great way to leave your audience with something, because he definitely left me with few things how I can brainstorm on my own, but then also to have fun with just a simple, stick figure drawings and things like that. So
Love it. Really creative concept. And yeah, I think those kind of things you want to, it's really well prepared. It's set up and there's different dimensions to it. So yeah, you want to bring that in.
Definitely. So I think that is where a lot of both is missed. That, just like you said, we are one click away from just checking completely out of that virtual meeting, and I did that. I'm guilty of it, so I know how that goes.
Yeah, and I think we should be honest with ourselves, because just because we have an event with 3,000 people in person in a hall, I like to call it the dark room moment. When the lights go out and then there's people on stage, the amount of people in the audience that automatically go and check their email is huge. You're talking like 50% of the audience, in my experience. One of my favorite things is to sit sort of in the back row and look behind people, and the amount of screens that you can see once those lights go out. So it doesn't mean that just because it's virtual, it's less engaging. It's just how we behave. So we have to give people a reason to connect, right? To engage, right? And if we don't do it, if we just expect that people are going to stay engaged, I think we're making a big mistake.
Yeah. Well, Miguel, we don't have a lot of time left. I would love to have you back, because I think that there is a tremendous amount of knowledge that we can still share with the audience. But leave the listeners maybe with 3 things that, if you could preach to the crowd, what would you say? What would you just 3 things that are very important for Miguel, or you think that everybody needs to know?
Well, let me challenge your audience, if they're up for it. Do the audience have a way to feed back to you, to communicate with you? Do you get comments?
Yes. Okay. This will be on a Facebook page. This will be posted on a YouTube channel. So there's a lot of ways to comment on it. Yes.
Okay. So if anybody has any questions, just put them in the comments, and I'll be back whenever we can arrange it, and I'll answer all the questions. Or I'll do my best to answer all the questions. So
perfect.
I don't want anybody to feel left out. So 3 things. I'm going to repeat a couple of things that I've already said, and then I'll add a new one. So I'll start with the new one. One thing I'd like to say is, when you're doing in-person events, like if you're participating, you're the guest. There's a red carpet laid out for you. There's certain kind of things that are there. There's usually food, hospitality, whatever. You're the guest. When you're doing virtual events, the event is the guest. The event comes into your home. Wow. And if you have kids, if you're doing the laundry, if you're cooking, if you're doing a bunch of other stuff, that stuff takes priority. And the event is the guest. And the event has to be a pretty good guest. If the event is not a nice guest, then you just turn it off, or you turn your camera off, or you just ignore it, right? So it's a very different mindset, because when participants walk into a physical space, they're expected to behave in a certain way. They can check their emails if they want, but as long as they don't disturb anyone, When it's on virtual events, it's completely different because the event is sort of a guest in your house. And that mindset shift, I think it's much closer to kind of creating a TV show than it is to creating an in-person event. So, yes, we binge watch Netflix for 8 hours sometimes, but that's because a lot of money and production quality goes into those programs. So yes, we can watch them continuously. Most online events don't have that level of production. So it's not easy to compare that. The other thing I'd say is that front row seat. Everybody's got a front row seat, which is great because I can see content really clearly. I can hear people. I can just check people on Google. I can go straight to LinkedIn and connect with people, which is great. But it's also very intimidating. Mm-hmm. So make sure everybody's got that front row seat. Make sure that you make them feel really welcome and that they understand, what they can do and what they can see, etc. So make sure you make use of that rather than kind of intimidate people by everybody having that front row seat. And the last thing I would say is that just 3-step concept that I said at the beginning. When you're thinking about online events, by all means, try out all the tools and all the features that you can, but then take a step back and go concept, which is for me the same thing as setting your objectives. So setting your things that are really priority and maybe a concept around the event. Is it an online trade show? Is it a showcase? Is it an award ceremony? What's that concept around there? And when it comes to virtual events, a lot of these things are still a bit unknown. A virtual event award ceremony, yes, I've seen a few done, but a few work really well and a few work really badly. So there's a lot of space for kind of reinterpreting that. Then figure out the processes. How are you going to get there? How are you going to invite people in? What teams do you need to work with? A lot of times people assign themselves 6 different roles for virtual events. And it's like, you would never do that at a real in-person event. So why would you do that online? Just because you can be at one computer that can control 6 different things doesn't mean you should. Mm-hmm. So make sure you kind of understand that and then find the tools and those little details to actually make it happen. So concept, process, tools in that order, please. And I think if you can force that a little bit, then I think it'll be a much better result in the end.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for just amazing amount of knowledge that we crammed into about 30 minutes. Miguel, I will be in touch a little bit later on today to schedule you for another session. Thank you for challenging the listeners. Listeners, please post comments for Miguel. I will give him about 3 to 4 weeks to come back so we can gather some questions.
Yeah, and if you disagree with anything that I've said, please also put that in the comments. I'd love to have, healthy discussions about these topics are always welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miguel. Have a wonderful rest of the evening in Denmark. Yes. And till next time. Bye-bye.
Perfect. All the best. Bye-bye.